Hello everyone, this is a tutorial on how to build a door in Unreal. It's super simple, so let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is come down here into the content browser, right click, and make a blueprint class of type actor, which is an object that can be placed or spun in the world, and they contain various amounts of code that basically tell them how to function and what they should do. So go ahead and create an actor, and we'll call this BP underscore door, because what we are making today is the door. So go ahead and hit enter, and then go ahead and double click it to open it up, and let me drag it over here into my window. So now what we have to do is add components to this actor, which are basically sub objects that are contained inside the blueprint. It'll make much more sense in just a moment. So left click add component and search for static mesh, just like that. And we'll call this door because it's a door. We're also going to need another component. So add component and search for box collision right here. Left click that and we'll call this collision, just like that. Now we need to come up here to the door and we need to assign a static mesh to it, which is basically what the door will actually look like. So left click where it says none, and in the drop down right here type door, and it should pop up right here in starter content. So click that, and as you can see, the door was assigned. Now what we want to do is move this door a little bit so it gets roughly in the center of the actor placeholder right there, the scene root, and right about there should be perfectly fine. Also, quick side note is if you search for door and it did not pop up, then simply navigate over here, go to add/import, add feature or content pack, content packs, and then add starter content. That's located right here. So back over in our blueprint, now what we're going to do is scale up our collision box, move it to the right a little bit, and then scale it out in all directions. Something about like this should be good. Next up, since we added a little bit of stuff to our blueprint, we want to come up here, compile it, and save it, which will basically tell Unreal and verify our changes that we've essentially made to the blueprint. So now, with this in here, we can come back over here to our main viewport, and it's always a good idea to test out what you make as you make them. So just drag in a couple of doors into the scene and hit play, and just make sure they're all here. None of them will work or do anything because we haven't added that yet, but just make sure they show up and their proper height and everything else. Alright, so we can head back over to our blueprint, and now is when we are going to add some of the code to the door to make it actually open. So navigate over here to the event graph, and what we're going to do is delete these three nodes right here. We don't need them for what the door will be doing, so we can just simply delete them by pressing delete on your keyboard. And since we deleted those, it is a good idea to go ahead and compile and save again. And you make sure you want to do this frequently, because you want to constantly keep your project up to date and have the engine acknowledging what state your current blueprint is in. So always remember to compile and save all the time. So now moving along, what we want to do is call two functions in our event graph here. And to do so, we're going to click on the collision over here. Now you're going to move back into the event graph, right click, and hit this drop down right under the search bar right here. Right here, this little drop down. Then click collision right underneath that. And then you should see these two, begin overlap and end overlap. We will be needing both of these, so just go ahead and select one of them and then right click again. Make sure it's selected over here when you right click again, add event, collision, and make sure you get the other one. This is begin overlap, so now we will need end overlap. Alright, so then just line them up, make them nice and tidy. Remember, compile, save. Alright, so now as you may have guessed, what these two functions do is they get called whenever something overlaps this box right here. As you can see, it's collision, and this is our collision, and this is collision, and this is our collision. So these are detecting overlaps and end overlaps on our collision box that we made for the door. As you can also see, there's various pins on this function. You have overlap component, other actor, other component, other body index, sweep, and the sweep result. What we will be needing is the other actor, and this is basically an object reference of what was overlapped. You can think of it like this. The blueprint on this component sees the world through its eyes, so whatever it felt overlap it is the other actor. So drag off of this and type in a menu should pop up and type in cast to first person character right here. Now depending on what project you're in, whether it be first person, third person, 2D, just search for your appropriate character, but you should be in first person. Now what this cast does is it's basically a check to verify that this other actor that overlapped our collision, because remember it's on begin overlap, make sure this other actor is this first person character, and if it is, then we sort of convert this other actor into this first person character because it is one. So it's verified and it actually is one, so it converts it over into it, so we can call some of the functions out of it. And those functions can be called right here. However, in this tutorial, all we're going to be doing is checking if it was that actor. So we do not need anything out of the functions we can call here. Casting is a bit weird to get your mind wrapped around, but there's several tutorials and documentation about casting that if you're confused in any way about it, just look it up. It's a bit hard to explain. But now what we're going to do is highlight the node, make sure it's highlighted in orange, hit Control C, and then come down here and hit Control V and hook this up to the same pins but on our end overlap. And as you can see, other actor gets plugged into object and the executable pin gets plugged into the executable pin. And now is a good time to compile and save again. Alright, so moving along, we have our cast, so we're verifying if the player actually overlaps the collision. Now we need the door to actually open when the player does overlap. So for this, we're going to make what's called a timeline. Right down here, add timeline. Now what timelines are, is they're basically timers that can play from start, stop, play in reverse, reverse from end, or set the new time which you don't really have to worry about that as much. But they're basically timers that play from the beginning to the end, and they increment values along while they update. But you'll get a full understanding of what they look like in just a moment. So now, starting from your timeline, drag off of play from start up here to your cast, and make sure it's the begin overlap cast. And what the play from start will do is what the name suggests. It will play the time from the start. Next, what you want to do is drag from reverse from end to the end overlap cast. And this does the exact same thing as start, except it plays it from the end, which will be our door closing. Now, this timeline is very bare bones, so we need to add our own custom track to it. So to do this, double click the timeline. Once you're in the timeline, it should be a blank screen like this, but go up here to add float track, click it, and call this new track door open, and hit enter. So now that you have it named door open, come up here to the length, which, remember how I stated, this is over a set amount of time. So this length right here is the amount of seconds that this timeline will play. So we want a length of 1 second. We want this whenever you play from start, it starts at 0, and whenever it ends 1 second later. Now we have to get some values plugged into this track that will actually change. So to do this, right click and add key to curve float 0, which will create a value key. And here we can set the time, which we want it to be 0, and we can set the value, which we want it to be 0. Now as you can see, our little key went down here to the very beginning of the track. And now what we want to do is right click again and add another key. But this time we want this one to be 1, and we want the value to be 1. Just like that. Now we haven't compiled and saved in a while, so make sure you do that and head back to your event graph. Now as you can see, your door open value is now right here. So what we want to do from here is multiply by hitting the little star on your keyboard and select float times float right here. And now the value we want to multiply by is 90. And the reason we want to do 90 is if we head back over to our viewport and we click the mesh and we look at the rotation, we want to rotate it on this Z value. And right now the Z value is 0. And if we come back to the event graph and we go into our timeline, this timeline starting at 0 seconds will set the value to 0. So the door will be closed how it was over here in the viewport. But then as the time progresses, the value slowly increases all the way up to 1 at 1 second. So if we head back to the viewport, we can rotate this, and we can rotate this 90 degrees, just like that. Now it's at 90 degrees and the door is open. And that's basically what this is doing here. This goes 0 to 1 over 1 second, and then this is multiplying that by 90 to get our 90-degree rotation. This might seem a little complicated at first, but once you mess with it a little bit, you'll get the idea of it. But back over here, now what we want to do is take our door mesh right here. This is basically referencing this static mesh. And we want to drag and drop it into this graph right here. Now what we want to do is come over here, drag off of the door, and do set relative rotation right here. Now mind you, do not do set world rotation, because the world rotation, if you do 0, 0, 0 in world rotation, then it could be sort of dislodged compared to the actual rotation of the actor itself. So, sort of like if you tilt the actor a little bit, then the rotations become off. So, 0, 0, 0 world rotation won't be the same as 0, 0, 0 relative rotation. It's kind of hard to explain, and it's like mathematical, sciencey stuff, sorta. But just trust me, just do set relative rotation on this. And now we want to set the relative rotation every time this updates across the second. So drag off of update and set it to set relative rotation. Next, what we want to do is, this is a purple node, and we can't drag this into the float, as you can see. So what you do is you right click and you hit this split strut pin right here. And what this does is it splits our rotations into individual floats. So now we have green and green. Now what we want to take is the Z rotation, which is yaw, which, like I showed earlier, will make the door open, have the open and close effect. So just drag that into the 90. And now if we come up here, compile and save, then we head back over to the example map and we hit play. If we approach the doors, they should open and then close. But as you can see, there is a little bug on it. You see, it's opening and closing, but there's little hiccups every now and then. There was one just then. So now we have to fix these little hiccups, which is pretty simple to do. So let's go up here back into our BP door. And then once we're in here, we want to drag this other section over just a little bit, just to give us a little bit of room. Now what you want to do is hold S on your keyboard and left click, and it brings in a sequence node. And we want to do this again for down here as well. What sequence nodes do is they split the operations from this one pin. They will go, now it will operate in the order of doing this one and then this one, like the name suggests. So after we overlap and it checks if we are first person character, then it will play the top one, and then afterwards it will play the bottom one. Now what we want to do is drag off of the then 0 and make a do once and click. And what do once do is they only execute one time past the completed point. So whatever is past completed will only happen one time unless you reset it. And what we want to do is, after you end overlap, we want to drag off of this then 1 to happen second and reset begin overlaps. Do once. And now all we want to do is highlight this, Control Z, Control V, and then drag off of then 0 over to this execution. And now what we want to do is make sure begin overlap resets end overlaps do once, just like that. And now what we do is drag begin overlaps back into play from start and drag end overlaps back into reverse from end, just like that. And then compile and save. And now we want to add a comment around this, just so we can remember what this does. So let's name it opens and closes door when character approaches. And to make a comment, you just left click, drag, highlight everything, and then press C, and it will make a little comment bubble like this. Now go back up here, compile, and save. And now let's head back to the third person example map, and I can show you what this actually did. So play it, and now if we overlap, it opens, and then we end overlap, it closes. Overlap the box, it opens, end overlap, it closes. Now, what was happening is everything in an actor by default sort of has collision on it. So what was happening there was our gun was overlapping first, and then like our actual like body was then overlapping, which was causing two overlaps, and that was making it restart the play from start, which gave it the jump effect. It's a little weird to mess around with, but once you get the hang of blueprints and components, it makes complete sense. But it's just a little thing to prevent the same thing from overlapping twice, basically. Alright, that was the end of the video. If you enjoyed and thought it was useful, don't forget to subscribe. And in the next video, I will make it where the player can activate the door with a button or click the door. And I will also be adding elevators, because those are basically the same concept, but vertical. So until next time, see you later. Bye.